Hello and welcome to the Molly Ivins Pavilion at the Tiny Tea Ranch. I'm Steve Bernal and this is my work. I'd like to start with two examples from a 6-part series I did at the end of last year, inspired by the work of Georgia O'Keeffe, one of my favorite painters. Much of her work, in the eyes of viewers and interpreters, represents certain female anatomy. And according to her, Miss O'Keeffe herself, that wasn't her objective. However, she relinquished herself to allowing viewers and interpreters to do just that, to interpret as such, as they see fit and as they will. She viewed it as being representation of nature in her work, from what I've read of her life. To that extent, and viewing many of her works, some of them in person as well, her interpretation of natural beauty is really astounding, of course, as many of you know. And I certainly agree. And I took it upon myself to take a chance at that sort of representation. And what I did for myself, as opposed to taking a face value of a flower, for example, onto a canvas, I decided to try and seek maybe more exotic ideas in nature. And I found, through some research and some seeking, examples of the pitcher plant and different types of poppies, and in my own imagination, twisted them to the form of what they would do to interact with each other, how they would interact with each other, if it was even possible. Of course, the not knowing, and to me, at any rate, the not knowing of any possibility is the freedom to be able to express it, to represent it, to try and paint it, simply put. And this is where my idea for the pitcher and the poppy came. I've been asked about the little objects in the upper portion of this painting, and my answer, what they may represent or what they may be even, is that I don't know. And to me, there is a freedom in not knowing in the context of making art and representing my own imagination. The not knowing of it is the pursuit. Which brings us to another example in the same series, number 6, as a matter of fact. And I discovered in a little bit of research and seeking fiddlehead ferns, which are edible plants, and apparently in the asparagus family of that realm. And I just thought they looked really cool. So I took it upon myself to interpret them in my own way. I titled this painting Unfurling, because apparently that's what they do as they grow, and decided to put a background of a scroll doing the same thing, sort of unfurling behind it. Maybe it's made out of water or wind or sky. And, just sort of having fun with the idea of strange plants coexisting, and in further seeking and further looking for ideas, discovered these leafy, weird flowers that I believe are native of Indonesia or that realm of the world, and decided to make them as the ground, laying not quite limply, but there is a solidity there from which everything else can grow and unfurl. Evidently, a lot of my work, in my work, I have a propensity to represent circles and tubes. And I'm sure there's a Freudian reference in there somewhere. But for example, this piece I call The Oracle here is simply a derivative of a photograph that a friend of mine took that really intrigued me, of a orange glass of water. The glass of the cup was made in an orange color. It was half filled with water, and sunlight was blazing through it, evidently almost horizontally through the water and through the glass, and creating the prism of the shadow that it made, this sort of elongated, exaggerated shadow of color on a tabletop or a countertop. And I decided to paint it and give it my own interpretation in changing the shape of that shadow, was to make it a little more curvilinear, I guess you could say. And as is my propensity and part of my imagination. And I call it The Oracle, which led me to the idea of a glass knot. That's what this piece is called. As improbable as that sounds, it's also very attractive to me because of the possibility of not knowing if it's possible. Therein lies the freedom. And so I made these two tubes that are colored in a smoky, sort of heavy way, which is the opposite of what most people sort of visualize glass as being transparent, for example. These are not transparent pieces of glass, and yet they are entwining with each other, and I don't know why. And there's the freedom, the glass knot. The large piece, which is in my idea the centerpiece of this exhibit, is called the sower. It represents a bit of a departure for me in that there is a figurative representation within the piece, and I tried to make him and her gender neutral and representing a sort of God, if you will, feeding and nurturing a receptive representative of earth and nature and a plant-like organism. And it was basically my thought response and my inner response to the strife and turmoil and chaos that is occurring almost everywhere in the world now. And to me, the protest is in perseverance, and perseverance of peace and love and beauty. And all of those things come from an equally strong place, as does all of this anger and chaos. There is my protest. And I made the face of my being in my piece, The Sower, with as little expression as I could make. Figurative representation is not my strong suit, although I do love the pursuit of the unknown, and as I've mentioned, and that was part of my idea as well. And I think I succeeded in making her expression one of almost neutrality, but you can sense the love and the care for feeding the organism with this ball of light or water or glass or whatever it is you might interpret it to be. Which leads us to my most recent piece. I just finished this days ago. I call it Orbits. And again, in my own imagination, my mind, and my place in the world, it represents the interaction between everything and everybody at all times. I mean, the Earth itself is rotating, in an orbit, which is in a system of orbits and organisms that are also orbiting through another larger system. And it goes on and on and on, of course. And that's what I had in mind when doing my piece, Orbits. At the same time, I thought, well, I wonder if it's possible for an orbiting sphere, if you will, to not only orbit another one, but move toward you while it's happening. And how would that affect your balance, your place of being, or would it at all? Again, the unknowing is the freedom. And there you have it. Orbits. 6 paintings representing my recent ideas. I'm Steve Bernal, and this is what I've been up to during the lockdown and global pandemic and all the other crises entailed. When this all began in early and mid-March and everything was shut down and turned off, I thought to myself, as an artist, what would I do without supplies? What would I do if all I had was a pencil and a piece of paper? And this is what I've come up with. This is 12 drawings done over the course of a few months during a very quiet time in ours and everyone's lives of late. And I hope you enjoy them. Each one has its own little story, but I will summarize a few of them. The first one, this is number 1 in the series. I I don't know if you can tell from that camera angle, but there is a tongue in that cone of a tube, I guess you could say, projecting like a bullhorn kind of tube. And I titled it La 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 because what it sounded like to me at the beginning of all of this was a lot of noise, a lot of talking from human mouths. The vibrating layers beneath it represent the vibration of sounds emanating from those mouths. And it was as simple as that. It's just an idea, a reaction, an internal reaction to that moment in time. There's number 2 and number 3, and those are a little more entwining and a little more internal, representing, if you look at them closely, sort of internal organs, if you will. One of them is tangled up and the other one is sort of trying to hide from itself almost. And it goes through a series of ideas and moments. I did a lot of reading, which I normally do anyway, but particularly when we weren't allowed to leave our homes, for example. And that's what this represents. This was number 4 in the series. Actually, I called number 4 A Spine and the Fly Leaves. It's basically a book without the pages. Number 5 is really, to me, the funniest one of all of them. I call it Roll to a Cure. And it was just an idea I had one day when I had been fed up with the pandemonium and panic over a possible shortage of toilet paper, which was kind of hard to believe and very comical to me. And there you have it. Number 6, I call it End of a Line. And it seemed like the end of a line in many, many ways in modern society for many of us experiencing at that moment. And as we go through each one of these from 1 to 12, each 1 or 2 represents a specific period of, say, a couple of weeks or a few weeks in the course of about 4 or 5 months of the initial phase of the epidemic and the pandemic and the lockdown and the shutdown. This one clearly represents a flying animal, a bird, an insect, whatever it may be, trying to find a home, flying into a home or a window through which is only more of the same. It's not necessarily a safe place to go. It's just a window. Maybe you'll feel transformed going through it yourself, despite the fact that it's the same place from which you come. Proximity is what I call this one, number 7 in the series, and it was inspired by the idea that we all have to be separate. There can be no handshaking, no hugging, no affectionate greetings of any sort. And I made them really close together, and there is a sort of a tail of vibration connecting the two of them, which is the connection that we all must have, that we all do still have, at least with our voices and with the affection we have for each other, that we can express through the voice. As it turned out, through the course of these 12 drawings, through those, say, 4 or so months that I did them, the recurring theme was the voice. I went through and decided, well, it was decided for me really, that it's all about vibrations, which, we as humans emanate to communicate with each other, as do, many in the natural world, all sorts of animals do. Emanate the vibration of communication through our voice, vibrating sound waves, emanating from us to anyone else who is listening. And that's all it is. Another idea of a vibration, I call this one the Floridian, and it sort of represents a combination of a seashell and a little bit of a snail type creature inhabiting it and also moving it through. But the shell itself is the result of vibrations and representing the vibrations. Number 10 in the series is clasping. They are waves that don't quite touch, but they are emanating towards each other. And then number 11, a confrontation of sorts between one organism and another. One seems to be dominating, and yet they're almost touching, but not quite, but they interact, and they are almost connecting. Maybe they're trying to connect, maybe they're trying to disconnect. That's up to you, I guess. And there is a certain vibration pushing everything in that direction, which leads us to number 12, which I call tongues. And if you look closely, they are scrolling and crossing each other and basically making a knot of what could normally be open communication, but since it's not or open communication, and there is so much vitriol and chaos in the world these days at the moment, then the tongues are interacting in a very closed way. And that concludes the series. The end, for now.